Because myth is a kind of externalization of inner contents.
Right.
And when we have problem with any myth, is because there is conflict between reality and the story of the myth.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to overcome this conflict is to going back to the inner sources of the myth itself.
Right.
And maybe we can combine new myth that will not be in conflict with the reality.
Right. We are here on this beautiful day with Professor Ron Margolin on the beautiful Shalom Hartman campus in Jerusalem, who are hosting us. Professor Margolin is professor at University of Tel Aviv. And Professor Margolin has written on a few subjects. He's well known for his work on Hasidism. But we thought that in today's conversation, we would instead talk about his work on inner religion, the process of interiorization in religious life, particularly in Jewish sources, as his title indicates. The subtitle being a phenomenology of interreligious life and its manifestation from the Bible to Hasidic texts, really from the beginning of Jewish religious literature up until today. Quite a broad survey. So firstly, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you too.
What I find that you do very, very interestingly here in your introduction is that you're very well aware of the challenges that face a comparative study in religion. And what I'd like to perhaps do is to begin by reading just one paragraph from your introduction here and open up conversation about the challenges of doing proper comparative work in the field of religious studies. And then we'll move on to the subject of your thesis itself, which is interiorization. How does that sound?
Very good.
Good.
I like your decision to begin with this.
Good. You write that your aim in the book is to highlight common denominators of religious phenomena throughout the world, with the fundamental assumption that despite the vast disparities between, for example, Hinduism and Judaism, that they both demonstrate what you refer to as interiorization. So that's your category of comparison. And that you aim with this category to demonstrate the existence of a common universal element that underlies geographically diverse religious phenomena. And perhaps just one more excerpt here, and then we'll turn to you. You write that the comparative discussion of religion obviously requires greater caution and sensitivity than was shown by leading writers in the 20th century, some of whom you mentioned here, like Mircea Eliade, as a key example. However, the hasty elimination, you write, of this important approach to comparative religion may result in the loss of the primary reason to engage in the study of religion at all. It's quite a strong statement. And moreover, that the need, maybe we'll leave it at that. Why don't you tell us about the attempts that were made into comparative study of religion in the early 20th century, some of the challenges that have been raised against them, and how your work seems to, what looks like, move past that impasse that's breached a lot of religious studies, that stops it from doing any comparative work, which you so rightfully point to the importance of.
I think that the importance of comparative religion is, in words of Martin Buber's words, this is the way toward religious humanism. And when we are speaking about religious humanism, we must think that each particular phenomena, like Judaism, like Jewish mysticism, is part of something very big, the human spirit, and the religious nature of the human spirit. And for me, it's very important because as a Zionist and grandson of real Zionists who came to Israel 100 years ago, I think that the spiritual meaning of Judaism and the spiritual meaning of Jewish mysticism is something which is greater than the particularism of our nationality. And because this is one of the main issues concerning the situation of Jewish people today in general, and especially here in Israel, for me it is very important to open the mind and the view and the understanding that there is no conflict between the uniqueness of the Jewish people and its needs and its nationalism and the fact that its spirituality is part of the big spiritual meaning of human life. And therefore, I don't want to stay or to be only in the particular aspects of this issue. So you can think that it's a political aim, but it's not political. It's something bigger than political.
Right.
It's my reaction to the fact that even some of my books and my first book about Hasidism, the Human Temple, became for some people a strengthen of their understanding of Jewish particularity.
Right.
And I don't want to be only in this side. I want to remind everyone that spirituality is something bigger than particular spirituality.
Wow, I feel like we've, in the first 20 seconds of the conversation, we've jumped into some of the deepest waters that are challenging the contemporary study and practice of religion. I think this question of universalism and particularism really is the question of the century in some sense, and also perhaps the past century. Let's perhaps, before we jump into that subject, and I think it's an important one, and I'd like to get there, let's perhaps talk from the perspective of religious studies, specifically in the comparative study of religion, the phenomenological study of religion and of mysticism. Could you perhaps trace out that? Because I think that thinking is bringing us to maybe the end of the story in some sense, the culmination of where we are today. How did we begin? The early comparativists, what was their goal in their research? What were their methodologies, and where did they fall short? And how are scholars like yourself trying to take up their project again without falling into the same pitfalls that they fell into?
Yes, of course. I think that maybe the first important figure concerning our issue is William James and his The Variety of Religious Experience. Because even though I can show you some mistakes or some problematic directions in his book, still this is one of the most important books concerning comparative religion, especially when we are speaking about the inner aspect of religious life.
Right.
And I said also in the beginning of my book that I see James as the beginner, one of the beginners of this method. When we read today, as in the past, James' book, we can understand that his target was to show people in the end of the 19th century, and I think that we are, from many aspects, in the same situation, to show people that were under the main idea of the rationalists of the 19th century, that religion and religious experience is part of, I can say, part of the past. It was a stage in the development of humanity. And religion is the stage before, one stage before rationalism. James tried to show to the mainstream of his time, and I think that even all the changes, it is still the mainstream today, who think that religious is not part of human life, original part of human life, original part of our point of view, and only a subject of the past or even tradition that we want to keep in order to have any continuity with the past. He tried to show that main aspects of religious experience is still alive in our life, even as secular people. And there are many forms that we can inquire or we can understand main subjects as sanctity or mystical experience, which is part of our life today. So for James, for example, patriotism, or what we can call nationalism, has aspects of kind of aspects like in religious sanctity. The religious saint is transferred in nationalism to the figure who can devote his life to the nation and overcome his egoism, his very, very subjectivity. And there are many examples in his book. So I think that when I try to explain myself and to explain my students, what does it mean to believe? What does it mean to have an experience of any kind of revelation? What does it mean mysterious? I want to show them that they have an ability to understand it as part of our life today.
Right.
And there is, for some points of view, there is importance to keep some aspects of religiosity in our daily life, because we lost some
Right.
of these aspects.
Right.
And this situation of losing aspects of religious feelings and religious experiences maybe is the cause of some of our emptiness in our modern, up-to-date life.
Right. So I hear that aspect that you're bringing forth from James, and I very much appreciate it, of the relevance of religiosity in the modern world, and how it may hold some of the answers to our modern alienation, ennui, and meaninglessness.
I have no interest in archaeology as is.
Right.
And I think that many academic books concerning religion is like part of archaeology.
Right. Right.
Like going to museum.
Right.
It's very interesting. Also, I can think that it's very interesting.
Right.
But I look for something which will be more meaningful for life.
Right. It does seem, even from reading your work here, that there is an agenda in your writing, and you're not afraid to hide that agenda. At the end of your introduction, you write that this attempt to scientifically find what is common amongst religions, through looking at their differences and what separates them, we can come to a realization of a shared universality and a strengthening of humanist values. There is a very strong agenda, it seems.
Because I think that everyone has agenda.
Right.
But many people don't want to reveal
Right, to admit their agenda, right?
Yes, they prefer to hide it.
Right.
And I think that the truth, academical truth, the scientific truth, its meaning is to reveal your agenda, not to hide it.
Right.
Your agenda.
Right. Very briefly, what are the humanistic values that you hope that your study of religion can do? That's not just a work of archaeology, as you're saying. If you could say in one foot, what vision of values is that?
First of all, I think that the main questions of religious experiences and not only mystical experience. Mystical experience is part of something wider. It's the question of the meaning of life, the meaning of our existence. And therefore, I think that existential questions are not separate from mystical experiences.
Certainly.
This is something very important to me because in the in the study of Kabbalah, for example, Gershon Scholem, for him, existentialism and mysticism are in conflict all the time. And I think that there is no way to separate between existential motives. It's not the same existential motives and the philosophy of some existentialists in the 20th century. But existential motives is something very, very deep in any religious thinking and research and understanding. Therefore, the combat to fill life with meaning is part of the understanding of the religious motives. When we are speaking about these existential motives, the question of life and death, the meaning of life and death, the meaning of the private existence, the meaning of the collective existence. When we are speaking about the collective meanings of religion, especially when we are speaking about religion like Judaism, which is really collective religion and not only a religion of the individual.
Right.
And there are many other values that the connection between them and religion is something very important. And first of all, concerning this aspect, the connection between ethics and religion.
Right.
And I know all the systems that try to reduce religion to ethics, right, or to put ethics instead of religion.
Right.
But I think that it's not so simple. And ethics, not the law, but the religious meaning of commandment is something that we can't distinguish from the basis of religion.
Right. So there's a true ethical component which you're seeing in the religious life of the community and of the individual, and particularly in the vision of interiorization of the mystic. And you believe that those ethics are relevant to us today, that they can be brought back to the fore, back to the conversation?
Of course. The question of ethics is maybe one of the main important questions in modern life, or in up-to-date, in contemporary life. We can see all the problems in Israel, in America, in Europe, in any country. Because since the 18th century, the culture lost the religious imperative.
Right.
And the question, what is instead, is the main question, because political systems like democracy can't be solution. It's the technique based on values, but the question, what is the source of our ethical values, is not a political question. It's a philosophical and religious question. And therefore, in place that we can find mystics or deep religious figures in the past who have these figures to say something deep concerning ethical values, it's something that we have to have concern right, about it. I think that the ethical question is one of the most important now, and we see it all over the world.
Let me ask you a question though. I need to ask you though, because you're writing here as an academic and as a historian. You're not writing as a religious author or as a theologian.
Yes.
And you
Because I am not.
right, and you don't make any metaphysical assumptions as you write. Is it possible to come to the ethical pronouncements, commandments, even if we're using a Jewish language, without those metaphysical claims behind us? How do we bracket the metaphysical and still make ethical demands upon the person? How do we get past that is ought problem?
This is the reason that I choose the method of phenomenology. Because phenomenology, first of all, the philosophical aspect of phenomenology in the beginning of the 20th century, and then the development of the study of religion in phenomenological ways is a kind of solution. I try to see the materials, to see the facts, to see the phenomena, and then only in the end of my description or my inquiry, I think that there is a place to ask the questions and to try to speak about the meanings. This also one of the big problems of a scientific approach and the differences between the sciences and the humanities. Only to describe the sources, only to describe the past is only the first stage. The second stage and the third stage must be the discussion of the meaning of these materials or these facts or these values that we can find in the ancient or less ancient sources that we want to study. It's very important because I think that to begin with my private or my individual, my personal philosophical point of views prevent me from seeing the materials as is.
Right.
But to leave only the information, it's to do half of the world. Half of the work, of course.
Of the work.
Yes.
How do you jump, though, from that work of describing and cataloging and categorizing the evidence, the data, the material, to moving on to something, doing a descriptive job, to doing something prescriptive, to saying, based on what this is the is that we're describing, and now we have an ought. Now, because of this fact and this fact and this fact, we therefore we ought to be acting a certain way. How do you jump from... It seems to me like the academic's role is to be descriptive, and it's the theologian or the philosopher sometimes to be prescriptive.
I don't accept it. I think that the question of meaning, what is the meaning of, we're speaking about mysticism, of unity in mystical experience, is the main. It's most important than to describe what we find in the books, because the facts that we can find some descriptions in one book and another book. It's only as I said before, the first stage. My question is, what does it mean? What does it mean that some saints in Christianity or in Kabbalah or Sufis or Buddhists speaking about their feeling of Kirvat Hashem? Of how can we translate
closeness to God?
Yes. What does it mean, this feeling of closeness? What does it mean that one says about closeness and others said about feeling of unification? I want to understand it in my little or in my limited ability.
Yeah.
But to leave it as is, as most of my teachers like to do, it's half of the work.
I don't mean to be difficult here, but it's so bizarre to me to hear an academic talking about what is the meaning of that. It seems when we're reading classic academic literature, that question is a non-question.
Depends. I found people who dealt with this, and I think that the fact that this is a little bit bizarre, it's a tragedy. It's a real tragedy of humanities, and one of the reasons, from my point of view, to the contemporary crisis of humanities, they lost the meaning to the culture.
I'm genuinely confused right now because I grew up in a religious community, and I'm very used to reading religious texts where there's a historical event that's described and there's a meaning that's prescribed from that event. Moses met God at Sinai, and therefore thou shalt not kill, and that shall keep the Shabbat. I don't even know what it means in a humanistic academic context to say that a mystic having a mystical experience in the 13th century means something for me today. What it means is that he was reading this text and she influenced that one, and the language they use is I don't even know what I actually don't even know what you're saying. What does it mean for historical events to mean something?
The meaning as a scientist is not the same as meaning as theologian or rabbi who preaches or teaches his pupils. The meaning is to try to understand what I, with my abilities or with my way of thinking, can say about this description of such and such experience. I try to understand to myself and to my readers, how can I understand with my vessels of thought these strange descriptions that we can find in religious books?
Where
does the question of interiorization or the idea of interiorization is part of the answer. When I speak about looking for ways of interiorization in general sources, in Jewish sources, I understand that the place that we feel or understand is the inner world, our inner world. So second question will be, what does it mean? If I think that these are inner experiences.
Okay.
Because if it's inner, does it mean that it's something subjective and not objective? And does it mean that I would like to say something that people can say, okay, this is your denial of the existence of any outer source for these experiences. So third stage, I must try to understand what does it mean, and what does it mean that we are speaking about inner experiences. But I think that for me, the most important thing is that I can find in the sources themselves expressions of inner feelings.
Okay.
When the prophets say that his prophecy is like fire in his heart, this is a proof that his feeling is an inner feeling. So I can find a lot of examples, and this is the project of this book, to show that there is no immediately contrast between inner and outer, that inner experiences is very important to the religious sources themselves.
Let's unpack that a little.
I very like the Jacob's dream.
Yes.
And I put it also in the cover, Chagall's painting of Jacob's dreams. Because Jacob's dreams is the vision is unbelievable. Yes, the letter and the angels. But this is a dream according to the Torah, according to Genesis. It is a dream. And when I understand that it's a dream, and I, as a religious or secular modern man or woman, I understand what does it mean dream.
Right.
And I have something in common
Right.
with the religious dreamer or with the ancient dreamer
Right.
and with myself.
Right. Right.
This is a very, very, very basic example
Okay.
to my claim.
So let's unpack that, because most of the time when academics are writing about understanding the religious experience of a figure of the past in modern terms, they're talking usually about some kind of reductive explanation. How can we reduce this to some sort of neurochemistry or to some sort of Freudian analysis of a relationship with one's mother and father? That's not what you're saying. You're not saying let's reduce this to our reality. Neither are you saying that that what was happening there was some sort of true metaphysical objective reality and that continues till today, and that possibility. That's not what you're saying either. Neither, I'm assuming, are you trying to say something anachronistic, that what we think today when we talk about mystical experiences is the same thing that was happening for Rumi and for the prophet Ezekiel. You're not saying that either. You're saying something different. You're saying that there's an interior experience that humans experience, and we continue to have inner experiences, and that the religious texts describe a phenomena of inner experience. And because they are humans, and because we are humans, and because humans are in the East and in the West, we can talk about this shared, common, human phenomena of innerness. Is that right?
Yes, it's one aspect, so a very important aspect of my claim. But I look for bridges toward the ancient world of religion. It's a fact that we are not in the same place that Jacob was when he dreamt his famous dream. We are not in the same place as the sages were when they spoke about Shekhinah, and when they spoke about prayers. And yes, the sages are closer to us maybe than the patriarchs, but they are also far from us. And then we can speak about many other examples. Even though, as you said before, human beings are human beings, and I am looking for ways to bridge the gap between them and us. Because I think that when we are not trying to bridge this gap, we are very, very, very far from these sources. Because there is a big distance between us and the sources. And I don't want to live in any illusion that I am in their place. I want to see the facts and to look for ways to overcome these distances. Not only one distance, many kind of distances.
Right. Good flow so far. You're enjoying the direction of it?
Yeah, but what do you think?
I see. I was going to do something a bit more like talk about the history of academia. You're like straight to the issue itself. And I appreciate that.
Yes.
Doctorate, you want to talk about the issue, and I appreciate. And I'm gonna
I don't
ask.
appreciate the way to hide and to escape from big serious questions.
Right.
I don't like to play their game.
Okay, good.
I have my game.
Good. So I want to hear about your game, and we'll.
I don't like the word of even the word game. It's not a game. It's a serious issue.
It's very serious. Right. You see it. It almost seems like you see it as like a religious issue, like a religious imperative that you're engaged in.
Yes, is it serious or not serious? Nonsense or nonsense?
Right.
And if it's nonsense, I want to say these and these are nonsense, and these are serious things. I don't think that all the things are serious.
Right.
I think that there are a lot of nonsense.
Right.
But I think that among the nonsense there is some very, very deep issues. You understand my approach?
I'm very curious.
I am not orthodox.
Right.
I'm not.
Right.
It's orthodox in the simple meaning of orthodox.
Right.
I think that there is a big complexity. But I have a big interest in delving in understanding and to take part and to see myself or my students or and to take it seriously.
What's interesting is that when people say that something is subjective, that's a way of dismissing it. And what you're doing is you're exploring subjectivity.
And this is the reason that I am very close to William James, because he said, maybe one of the first scholars who said that subjectivity doesn't mean non-truth.
Right.
Subjectivity is not non-truth.
What is?
And maybe because this is the deep meaning also of Kantian philosophy, that all my rationalism is in very limit. There are very limits to our rationality,
right.
and rationality or human rationality is not identity with the divine truth. It's not the same as they thought in the Middle Ages.
Right, that the human rationality can reach the divine. So the question then is, what is subjectivity, and how may we be able to? What's its relationship to truth? These are questions that need to be addressed.
Yes, we have to deal a little bit more in the meaning of subjectivity, objectivity, and the question if scientific objectivity is really the way to truth.
Right. Good. I'm
total truth, or the only truth, as you can say it. Especially when we're speaking about human issues.
Right. Good. I'm also gonna focus the conversation around mysticism, because that's what this series is about. It's about mysticism.
Of course.
I want to know what you think that we
can... not escaping from mysticism.
Good.
I like mysticism.
Good. So me too. So I hope to see what you think may be the meaning of mysticism. Oh. Good. We're back.
Yes.
We're back with some new energy.
Maybe. I hope so.
Some new nitzotzot.
Nitzotzot, of course.
What can I? By the way, do you mind if I call you Ron or Professor?
Yes,
you prefer?
Ron. Professor is not part of me. Even my name is not part of me. But Professor is something so.
Got it. I have a very simple question. What is the meaning of mysticism?
When I speak about mysticism, because mysticism is something so wide and so many concepts or so many ways of speaking about mysticism, I prefer maybe like James to speak only about the mystical experience and the mystical feelings, because mysticism can be non-rational, and mysticism can be magic, and mysticism can be esoteric, and mysticism can be theosophical ideas, and I think that all these, I prefer not to use the word mysticism concerning all these aspects that or the things that I spoke about, and to be more concise, more specifically, and speaking about mystical feelings, mystical experiences, which are expanding of our awareness, consciousness, not daily. Mystical experience is not our daily experiences of life. Mystical experiences and feelings are feelings that we feel in a very specific moment, very unique moment. I don't want to use the very strict limit explanations of James that mystical is without words, mystical is noetic, mystical is passive and not active, and Evelyn Underhill said no, it's also active and not only passive. We can use it; it's good. These definitions can help us, but the main meanings is experience that are not ordinary experiences of life, and they give us feeling of connection with something which is bigger than the daily life and bigger than ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Fritz Stahl, in his book Exploring Mysticism, I think in the beginning of the 70s, developed the claim of William James in his variety of the religious experience, in his chapter about mysticism, about the connection between drugs experiences,
psychedelic experiences,
and later on because James didn't speak about psychedelic.
Right.
He spoke about his
nitrous oxide.
Yes.
Right.
Narcotic materials that he used.
Right.
And later on the psychedelic experiences in the 60s, especially in the 60s, that there is connection between the mystical experience, the religious mystical experience, and such experiences.
Right.
Even though I don't think that it's the same. But the fact that it's not the same doesn't mean that there is no connection.
Right.
And these are experiences of our consciousness, of our other consciousness, or expanding our consciousness.
Right.
And I think that we can use these experiences in order to understand something. I don't think that everything, but something about the religious mystical experiences.
Let me augment my question a little. As opposed to asking what is the meaning of mysticism, you want to restrict that category and that term to mystical experience, and that's reasonable. Let me ask the question then: what is the meaning of mystical experience or mystical experiences?
Look, I don't think that I can say from my personal experience I had such mystical experiences. I did some experiences in myself, but from reading or from my impression from reading descriptions of mystical experiences. And I think that against Sholem, that some of the main descriptions in the Bible are also mystical experiences. Jacob's dreams is a mystical dream. Even though Sholem thought that mystical experiences is only in the last stages of the of the religion's development.
Right.
I can't accept it. It's not true. It's not true. It's not the place here to speak about such theories. But these theories are, I can say, not serious enough. And everyone can think about the meaning of such descriptions of experiences, like there's Isaiah some chapters or Ezekiel some chapters, and as I said about the Jacob dreams and others. And when I think about it, these are experiences of overcoming the limits of our consciousness, the limits of our conception of our life and our existence, and when we are coming back to the normal situation, something remains from it. Something remains and give us the impression that there is something more than what we can understand and conceive by our senses.
you telling me that what you're describing now, that is what the mystics describe? Are you doing something descriptive, or are you telling me that the mystical experience points to a reality in which we can get beyond our ordinary perception and reconstruct our relationship with reality and experience other forms of consciousness? I'm not sure what you're telling me right now.
Look, when they speak about other reality or higher reality, I think that the main point is that they are speaking about feeling close to something which is very strange from the normal reality, and something which the feeling when you are inside this experience is that life has meaning, bigger meaning than the ordinary meaning that we feel in the daily life.
Right.
And this is the reason why I think that mystical experience is a very important part of the question of meaning of life that religion can provide to people.
Right. So the mystics describe their experiences as coming into contact, relationship, union with something larger than them, beyond them, the totality of being, even sometimes God. Are you saying that? Are you saying that you believe that that's the case, that that's actually happening? What are you saying right now?
It's not a question of belief. I don't think that it's a question of belief, because first of all, I can believe that someone had such experience, because he can. I don't say what is the sources of such of his experience, but
right.
This is a testimony.
Right.
This is his testimony.
Right.
And we have a lot of kinds of testimonies, and these experiences, or these mystical experiences, are a kind of testimonies that there is no reason that I shouldn't take it seriously. But what caused this experience, it's another question, and it's not so important question, because if taking some psychedelic drugs can change my consciousness and my conception of reality, and a dream after 40 days of fasting will cause me to feel also such a very, very unique changing in my mind. The reason is not so important, because I don't believe that molecular explanation can explain our ability to speak, our ability to feel. These are the means.
Right.
But these means doesn't give us any understanding of what it is.
Right.
And this is the big question of material and spiritual, body and spirit.
Right.
And the question of body and spirit is still a big question.
Unresolved, right.
And all the scientists who think that they have the solution when they speak that every spiritual phenomena has material aspect, it can be truth, but it doesn't explain what is the spiritual meaning of this physical materials.
This is a very delightfully difficult conversation for me, because you can see I'm struggling here to understand what it is that you're trying to do, because there are many historians from James and Underhill and Otto and Schleiermacher and Eliade who are describing the mystic's experience. They're telling us what is the mystic's testimony. We have plenty of those. We have anthologies. We have Aldous Huxley. We have everyone doing that. You're not just doing that. You're not just giving us another recollection of the testimonies on a specific theme. That's not what you're doing. Not just what you're doing.
Not just.
Right. You're so we know those. Yes, we know what the experiences of the many mystics. We know what they're saying, and we can see patterns of commonality, and we can debate: is there a common core or is there not a common core? But you're saying something else now. You're saying that What are you saying that's different than that? Because that's
What,
been said
what do
already.
you mean? How do I understand my sayings?
I hear you saying that there's something meaningful for us in these testimonies that is not pointing us to any kind of metaphysical truth or reality, but there's something that we can explore here in the subjective realm, in maybe sort of a trans-subjective, like the intersubjective. I don't know what term you'd like to use, and in that we could learn something that would make demands upon us, ethical demands or demands, or challenge us in our epistemology or maybe even our metaphysics. Is that what you're saying?
I think the metaphysics here is less important.
Okay.
Metaphysics as metaphysics,
Right.
as knowledge.
Right.
The question is not a question of knowledge. It's more a question of giving meaning to our subjective life and our mutual life, not
Okay.
only the individual
Right.
life,
Right.
but also the common life of group of people, or maybe of more than group of people, of, in the case of Judaism, a nation.
Right.
But I think that this is the main point, how to give meaning to life. And not if this meaning way, or this is way to give meaning, is from outer, inner sources. It's because we don't know anything. Because we don't know anything. Because I'm really Kantian from this point of view. I understand very seriously his revolution, his
Right.
Copernican,
Right.
second Copernican revolution.
Right.
We don't really know about reality. When we think about the very, very basic claims of the quantum mechanics or the atomical theory, so we understand that most of the being is the emptiness.
Yes.
We can't deal with this, and we understand in our mind that this is something very basic in atomic theory, and everything is based on this. But how to digest it?
Right.
And the same thing I can speak about many other theories or knowledge, and I don't think that the main issue is the knowledge. I can understand how sets of knowledge could be or where vessels to base existential meaningful life in Kabbalistic way, in Indian's ways. But if we can take the example of Kabbalah, the theosophical ideas are kind of metaphysical sets that they have no advantage on other ways, and their importance is not as a scientific understanding of the reality, but the meaning that they gave to human beings who based their
Right.
spiritual life according to these ideas.
Right.
So the main issue is the experiential aspect, is not the scientific aspect
Right,
of the knowledge.
So, I think I'm slowly beginning to understand. I feel like I'm walking around in a dark room and I'm kind of groping around in your mind and I'm figuring it out. And I want to sort of play devil's advocate in that process, and I hope that whoever's joining us to listen can come along for that journey. You're after a quest for meaning in life, not the meaning of life, but meaning in life.
Yes,
and
because there is no one meaning.
Sure. Point taken. And you believe that there's meaning, there are aspects of meaning to be discovered in the religious and mystical traditions of the world. And you're acknowledging that it's a subjective experience, and your whole study is one of interiority, of subjectivity. Most people, when they think about meaning, I guess when people think about the meaning of life, they're thinking about something objective, perhaps.
Okay.
When people think about meaning, they could think about subjective things that are what's meaningful to me. Being with my family is meaningful. Is it objectively meaningful for the universe if I spend time with my family? No, but subjectively. So is that what you're saying? You're saying that there are subjective paths and lifestyles and arts that have been discovered throughout the ages in the religious mystical traditions that impart a sense of meaning to people in their lives, and that we can tap into those rituals and ways of life and practices and ethics and find meaning in our own lives. Is that what you're saying?
This is what religion does to people. And religion in the wider way to think about it. Not only the traditional religions, but also ways of life that can be a substitute of the traditional religions. And I think that this is the main point. Subjectivity is not a curse. Subjectivity is our situation in life, and this is our ground. That from that ground we can develop. We can direct our way. The thought that subjectivity is inferior than objectivity is not relevant anymore. I don't think that objectivity has no sense, but there is objective aspect, there are subjective aspects, and life is the combination of both of these ways of seeing the reality. And the tendency to think that subjectivity is inferior is very anachronistic, or not even anachronistic, is very, how can I say, not anachronistic, but old-fashioned.
Right. It certainly seems the case, though, that religious traditions are, in their own description, in their own epistemologies, as far as we can understand them, are making objective claims, right?
Yes.
And you're not concerned with the fact that religions are in their own attempt trying to be objective. You're not beholden to that.
Because of the objective claims of religion, there are the objective claims of the Christianity, and there are the objective claims of Islam, and there are the objective. I very like the Jerusalem, Mendelssohn's book, when he said that there are eternal truths and there is historical truths.
Right.
And the particular claims of any religion is what he called historical truths.
Yeah.
It depends in specific events and the history of a group of people. Doesn't mean that it's a lie.
Right.
But it's not an eternal truth. And if it's an eternal truth, it must be something universal.
Right. Right. What would you say then, again, to play the devil here? Someone like Applewhite, Heaven's Gate.
About?
You know Applewhite, what was his first name? The cult.
Applewhite?
Yeah. The Heaven's Gate cult, that they were all going up to heaven, and they all took cyanide together. They all took whatever poison it was. They killed themselves. He had a very powerful subjective experience, and it was very persuasive, and he convinced, I don't know, a dozen or so people.
He tried that all his people will have the same or behave in consequence to his subjective experience.
Right. So what criteria are you using to evaluate between subjective experiences? Why be interested in the subjective experience of Jacob and not of Applewhite and Heaven's Gate?
I think this is the point, that there are some subjective experiences that the men who experienced this subjective succeeded, he or she or the author who described, succeeded to transfer it to common language, to a kind of common language that even me, after some thousand years, can be impressed as a child and as an adult from this story of Jacob's dream. When I read the story of Jacob's dream, I can find myself in this dream in any way. I can imagine something. I can see the description of a leather that the legs are on the ground and the top is in the sky. It's such a big symbol or image that I can fulfill it with something from my subjectivity. But if the experience is very, very specific, very, very personal, and someone tries to force me to have the same attitude or the same excitement, it's something very artificial. And I think that this is something very, very subtle.
Right.
The differences between the big subjective experiences that can fulfill other people and the smaller subjective experiences that you must keep it for yourself.
So let's bring a different example. There are millions of people who are very subjectively in love with Jesus and who subjectively experience his death atoning for them and bringing them back to purity so that they can be one with God. There are many Muslims who subjectively feel the purity and holiness of the Prophet Muhammad and feel his voice to be, the message of God for them. And there are many Jews who feel, when we're talking about universal subjective experiences, how do you yourself...
As a scholar of religion in general, I must appreciate and take seriously the subjective feelings of the Christians concerning Yeshua, Jesus Christ. I must appreciate or taking seriously the Muslims' beliefs, etc., etc. It doesn't mean that I can connect myself personally to all of these, but if I don't appreciate, I can't deal with these issues as a scholar of religions. If I, from the beginning, judge other religions hierarchically, like Hegel, for example, he was a terrible man because he judged all the religions and he knew what is in the beginning and what is in the top.
Right.
And this way of speaking about religions, typically to many people, even today, but to the 90s, it's terrible. It's not relevant. It doesn't mean I try to understand, as a Jew or as non-Christian, I try to understand what does it mean, as Paul said, to believe and to believe that a credo that has no rational meaning can redeem me.
Right.
I try to understand it. I can appreciate it because in history, this credo had a lot of power,
Right.
Spiritual power. It doesn't mean that I prefer personally to take it as my credo.
Right.
But if you deal with religions and you judge them from this point of view, and you think that such and such credo can't supply to specific people meaning in their life, you are not serious.
Right.
You are not serious.
Right.
Because you don't want to accept the facts.
Right.
And subjectivity has factual meaning. It's not imagination.
Where do you find your own meaning?
When do I find my own meaning?
Yeah.
It's another question. First of all, I don't think that I have a set of answers. I use many materials that I found during my years of scholarship from Judaism, but not only from Judaism. I like Rumi very much. I like to dance with his devotees, and I feel that dancing in Mevlevi circle is maybe the best way to pray. As Heschel said, that he is praying when he went in the demonstration of
Selma with
yes, in Selma. I think that there are a lot of marvelous pieces in the teachers in the teachings of the first teachers of Hasidism. I wrote about it. I found it something that I like very much the parable of the Jabarias of the Baal Shem Tov.
Yes.
It's a great parable, and I can give you a lot of examples.
Right. So you're taking bits and pieces of meaning from everywhere.
I built something for myself. The main question for me is life and death. I lost my father when I was 3 years old. I lost my wife after 40 years, 4.5 years ago. My mother is very ill now, and I am with her between life and death. I think that the question of life and death and give life to the babies and it's the real source of any religious thought, and everyone, as I myself, must deal with it. I believe that the question of love is a great question. I think that Martin Buber's in his I and Thou tried to do a very, very serious effort to understand in very, very up-to-date or contemporary concepts what can be the meaning of revelation, what can be the meaning of unification with God, and his idea of meeting as the meeting of I and Thou is a very serious idea, but it's not the ultimate question answer. There are some problems in his answer, but I appreciate very much his dialogical thinking, and I think that from time to time I try to realize it, to live according to this idea, and to see this idea as, for me, it's kind of explanation of some biblical and later religious Jewish religion ideas. But I can't say that in my age, 65, I found a whole system and a complete set of religious instructions.
Right.
I am not a halachic man. I have conflict with halacha. As halacha, I can't live with ruling system which it's very strict. I can't go. I appreciate many aspects in halacha. I understand many aspects of halachic way of life. But I am not. I tried as a young man some months, and not more than this. I was in yeshiva in the age of 17 years old. And after less than half a year, I left the yeshiva, and I don't feel sorrow about it, because I met so many people who did this way, and after many years, they found that it's not so simple for them too. So I try to be modest. I don't think that I am modest, but to be modest. Moses was a great figure. as the most modest man. And this is also very, very profound idea of modesty, modesty in life. It's a real religious idea, the idea of modesty. And I like the Hasidic and the Jewish sayings concerning the value of modesty. And I think that this is one of the big difficulties of religious people to make modesty a real
value,
in their life.
Right. So it's fascinating to hear.
There's no place
right.
to the I and to go together. And when you are full with yourself,
right.
you are very, very far, I think. As some of the Hasidic tzaddikim said, you're very, very far from for any sense of divine and God.
When the ego is there, God can't be there.
And the ego is a very, very big problem of all of us, also of mine. Oh, ego is terrible, but ego is also energy, you know. It's very complicated. But these are the great questions of life.
Can I ask a question which I never thought I would be asking a professor here on the Shalom Hartman campus? Do you consider yourself a mystic?
I don't think, because I told you at the beginning of our conversation that I have not a lot of experiences, of mystical experiences in my life. And I didn't dedicate enough time, maybe because I went to the academical way to develop it or to give more possibilities for myself. But I think that there is a mystical feeling or sensitivity. I think that I have a kind, to be modest, a kind of sensitivity to mystical figures, to mystical experiences. When I read something which I feel that it's real mystical, I can be astonished. And I think that this is also very important, that we can read about mystical experiences of other figures or historical figures, and and from time to time we can be fulfilled by.
We can be moved by them.
Yes, moved by them.
Does that conflict at all with the other part of your identity and professional life as an academic, or do you not care about academia anymore, or do you see them not in conflict? How are you relating there?
No, I try to prevent myself from such conflicts, and I don't feel today that I must take in my mind all the time the fact that someone in the academy, some professors will say, he is not scientific, because I think that they don't see themselves, they don't see their everyone has his agenda, and it's an illusion to think that I can be objective researcher. I must take seriously my basic understandings of life, of the materials that I deal with, and therefore it's not a problem for me. Today, I don't know, I don't remember even as a young man or at the beginning of my way, but today it's not a problem. Today it's not a problem, and
I'm glad. You know what's funny? Very often when I'm reading a book, the first things that I'll read the introduction. Naturally, because I think it's at the beginning of the book, and it also usually sets the tone. You know what's coming, and then before I read the book, I'll read the spoiler. I'll read the last paragraph, because I find this very often, particularly with academics and historians, that not only do they give their conclusion at the end, they also say what they really believe at the end, because the whole time they're trying to be careful and they know their peers are reading, and at the end they say.
And when you take such a big book or other big books, and you don't, and the chance that you will finish it,
so it's good to get to the end just in case, right?
So.
Right. And I think often the ends of books, even very dry books, the ends are often quite sweet, quite juicy. There's something there. Shalom ends his major trends with a Hasidic story about stories,
the
Right, a very profound Idel and his new perspectives with telling Shalom's story again in his own way and his own kind of ending there. So I skipped to the end of your book, and you wrote like this, and I'd like to ask you what you intended here and what you meant here, because I think that this gets back to our question of perhaps the difference or the relationship between objectivity and subjectivity, and if there's such a hard boundary between them. And I'd love to hear your reflection on your last lines here. You write that to sum up our inquiry, aided by Gordon, Aleph Dalet Gordon, who you've been quoting earlier, that the focus of inner religious life is the experience in which the human psyche feels and thinks while directly attaining life, such that the world's existence attains, feels, and thinks within it. Within the human's psyche, when they're attaining life. That in the human psyche feeling and thinking, in this attaining life way of thinking and feeling, the world itself, the existence of the world also attains feeling and thinking within the human psyche. What do you mean by that?
I want to say, because you said, no, I forgot.
The very last 3 lines.
Yes. Look, I think that many of the things that we spoke about, subjectivity and objectivity, you can find in the writings of Aaron David Gordon. He was a very unique figure and a very spiritual that tried to transfer. He tried to transfer the religious experience and even mystical experience of his background, Jewish, Eastern Europe, surrounding to modern reality, and therefore he understood the meaning of subjectivity in contrast to objectivity, and this was the point, to understand that we live in our consciousness, as the Baal Shem Tov said, that where you think you are. במקום שאתה חושב, שם אתה נמצא.
במקום שמחשבתו של אדם, שם הוא נמצא.
שם הוא נמצא.
Right.
Where you think, there you are. There are some ways to translate it, but I think that this is one of the ways. Rachel Elior found that he found it in Magid Misharim of Rabbi Yosef Karo. But the point is not, as we as historians try to, where is the first time that this sentence we can find in the sources? But the point is, what did he do with this sentence? He made this sentence the center of his way. Therefore, the importance of this understanding in the beginning of Hasidism is greater than in any stage before, of Jewish thought before. And I think that this is the point. The inner builds our outer. And therefore, maybe the objective is very important, but the subjective is maybe even more important. And for me, without this understanding, it is a waste of time to deal with religion. Because today, for me, this is the meaning of religion in contemporary life, that it's so cynic and so material and so out there. The outworld is shaping our daily life, but really, the inner is what is shaping our inner life, our whole life, not only the inner life.
So you're trying to call us back to our inner experience, the primacy of the subjectivity.
Yes, Yes, but not in general, because it's right to say it in general, but concerning religion, to look what can religious sources can contribute to our life from this point of view. Because we are so outer.
Both the secular and religious world.
Yes, this is the point.
Yes.
That it's something common to religious people today and to secular people. And I like very much the story of Samuel book when it is written there that God sees by his eyes and that man sees by his eyes, but God sees the inner, sees the heart.
האדם ירא לעיניים והשם ירא ללבב.
ללב, כן. This is a very, very profound essay or saying that we can find in the Bible, we can find it later in the sages, the understanding that the divine is in the inner.
Right.
The divine is in the inner.
Right.
And not in the outer.
Right.
And for me, this is the reason that it was not stupidity to dedicate so many years to religious sources. Because the divine is in the inner.
I think I'm just beginning to understand what your goal here is and what your project is, and that is to bring a return to innerness.
Yes, a little bit. A little bit, because you can't be only in the inner.
Right.
And you must find ways to live the life, and the life today is very, very outer life.
Right. Right.
But not to sink totally in this externality, external life.
Right. You caught me by surprise.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
I wasn't.
Why do you say it? And what do you mean?
I wasn't expecting to hear what you said. I mean, even though I'd read some of your work, it's very counter narrative of what's happening in academic religious studies.
Yes.
So it was surprising for that reason, which is not a bad thing, but I think it created an interesting conversation, because I was trying to figure out what it was that you're trying to say.
Because you are saying that it's very, very different. Because the mainstream is
either constructivist and contextualist, or it's perennialist and common core, and this is real, or metaphysically
total
true.
common core.
Yeah. And you're saying...
No, I'm not here, not
You're
there.
saying neither of them, right?
Yes.
Which makes it interesting, makes it challenging.
Yes.
And I hear that you're arguing for subjectivity itself. Really, you're arguing for interiorization and for the centrality of that, for the importance of that.
And the interiorization is something which is not only mystical experience. Mystical experience for me is part of interiorization, but there are aspects of interiorization, including some aspects of ethics, which is something else. And for me, also the point that existential aspects of religious life is very important to religious interiorization, and it can be together with mysticism. It can be non-mystical.
Right.
And in addition, also all the issue of rituals, because all the question of kavanah, intention, in rituals, that in Judaism it's a big issue, and I think that this issue is an issue of interiorization. It's not less important. So I see maybe wider picture.
Yes. What's also interesting is the way that you argue for the primacy of the interior, in that the interior creates the exterior, right? You quoted from the Baal Shem Tov that where the person's thought is, that's really where they are. And in some sense, that's very much the modern turn to the subject, is this realization that we create our reality through our perception, and the power of that, which sometimes can get co-opted by more sort of new age ways of thinking. But I think it's a
But
basic.
I don't take it so easily,
Right.
like New Age.
Right.
It's simple. It's very simple in many New Age sects that, okay, only subjectivity. I don't say only subjectivity.
Right.
I say, but subjectivity is very important to balance the total influence of external world.
There is a place for the objective in your worldview.
Yes.
Even,
there is.
but it's unreachable in some
For
sense.
example, when I deal with these texts, history is important for me to see the context.
Right.
In order to understand without historical viewpoint, you have no chance to see the context.
Right.
And the context is important in order to understand what we are speaking of.
Yeah.
But I don't see history as a main goal, a target as itself. It's a mean. I speak like Harry Wolfson from Harvard. He spoke about it too. That history, philology are means and not target.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the point, and this is one of the problems of humanities, that in life history lost its status because in Europe, history in the 19th century built the nations. So it was very important. Today, the culture is non-historical culture in many aspects. But in humanities, in academy, history is still the queen.
Right.
But she is not the queen in life.
Right.
So if they will not understand it, they will lose their place totally. I don't say it because I think that history is not important, but I think that history is important as a mean for contextuality. You can see it. I'm also educator. I had a program of training teachers many years here at the Hartman Institute in the Tel Aviv University. I taught as a young man 7 years in high school in high schools. I'm working as an advisor to the education system concerning humanities in general, and especially Jewish sources, teaching of Jewish sources. And I think that as an educator, I see a wider picture. And also as an intellectual, small, modest intellectual, I think that when you think as an intellectual, you must admit that the humanities can't stay in philology and history.
Right. Right.
And,
right. Or else there's a fundamental disconnect between what's important for humanity, for actual humanity and humanities, and when those two become separated.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's an interesting point. So, I mean, is it fair to say that for you the ends is ethics? Is that a fair? You're saying the ends is not history, but what? What would you? Is there one thing that would fit that slot?
Is worldview, meaningful worldview, positive worldview, ethical worldview. These are more important, of course.
You could see why I was very surprised by the conversation. Usually when you talk to academics, you don't expect positivity and meaning and affirmation. You expect cynicism and skepticism and doubt and criticism.
Yes, but I think that these are only also means and not targets as for themselves.
Right.
Look, we are sitting in Shalom Hartman Institute. David Hartman, I worked with him a lot of years. He was also, like me, professor of Jewish thought at the Hebrew University, but he was not an ordinary academic. He was very connected to Jewish life and to general life. And he all the time in his seminars here at the Institute, he was very provocative, all the time provocative. And he didn't give the scholars to sit on the, on their near their school, near their tables, without being involved in human life and Jewish life.
Yeah, I
He
hear that.
demanded all
Yeah.
the time. I appreciate it very much.
Yes.
He demanded all the time a connection between academic life and the life themselves.
Right, real life.
Real life.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think when we're talking in a religious context, and in a historical context, really, at least in the West, when we talk about the ultimate objectivity, we're talking about God, right? We're talking about, to use the language of philosophy, the necessary existence, the mechuyav hametziot, as opposed to the rest of existence, which is contingent on God's existence.
But this is a very, very medieval concept, you know.
Right.
And contemporary situation, nothing is not mechuyav hametziut.
Right. Nothing has to be the way it is.
Yes.
But for the medieval context, which is one which you study as well, it's certainly the case that God is the objective reality,
Yes.
the truth, capital T, that we all strive towards, the meaning, the good,
And the wisdom.
the wisdom, the beautiful. It's the capital of all human values, and so therefore, and the human, in contrast, is the subject, and we have this contrast between God and human. On that note, on that binary, on that polarity, there was a passage here from Yochanan Mufs. So he wrote a book on the personhood of God in the Bible.
Yes.
A great biblical scholar. But you bring a quote from another one of his books called Love and Joy.
Yes.
And I thought it was immensely profound and really, really knocked me off my feet. And I think maybe this epitomizes the project and the conversation. And I was reading this actually last night in bed, and it got me out of bed. I was like, it was really tremendous stuff. He writes like this: humanity, created in the image of the divine personality, does not reach its completion without the creative leap of loving communication. It is a great mystery that psychologists have not yet understood the importance the Bible has for them. In the image of the biblical God, we have a definition of personality that is remarkably close to the modern definition. It is a little known secret that the modern Western definition of personality has its roots in the biblical revolution. The new idea in the Bible is not the idea of one God, but rather the revelation of a new concept of personality. The divine personality is, to a great degree, the mirror image of man's understanding of himself. And if you should react in horror and say you're promulgating heresy, I can reformulate the problem slightly and say God is defined as personality and humanity is created in God's image. Judaism conquered nature, the gods of nature, and put in its place the personality that revealed itself in an act of love. Everything that formerly had a natural quality to it took on in Judaism a personalistic cast. I thought that was a magnificent paragraph, and you brought it here for a reason. Can you tell us what you were bringing this paragraph for, and what you're reading here in Muff's really revolutionary reading of this relationship between personality and godhood, humankind, the image of God, the image of man? What is this paragraph meaning for you?
Look, I think that the roots of these ideas you can find in the philosophy, or also in the philosophy of Ludwig Feuerbach in the 19th century. The idea of the religious concepts as reflection of the higher inner qualities inside human beings. In other words, you can say that we know about God from the inner higher qualities that we can call it divine qualities. Hasidism and the Baal Shem Tov said, based on the verse in Job, "Mibsari echzeh Eloah," from my flesh I shall see God. And this is one of the main ideas in Hasidism, and I put him because he understood it concerning the Bible itself. this idea of from my flesh I shall see God, it's maybe the main idea of interiorization as a religious concept. We know about God from the world, but more than this, we know about God from the divine abilities, qualities, higher characteristics of our personality. The high inward us, in our inwardness, is the testimony of the divine outside human beings. And I think that this is a very important Hasidic idea that he, in his book about the biblical personality of God, tried to show it. It's something that I think that I can educate Jewish students, religious and non-religious, traditionalists and seculars, and to see these sources as a very important, profound sources to understand ourselves and to understand the high qualities that can lead us to be better, that can lead us to improve ourselves and to improve our society. And this approach to Jewish sources at all, or specifically if we speak about the connection or the tension between Kabbalah or the mainstreams of Theosophical Kabbalah and less famous streams that became very important in Hasidism, is the understanding that the speaking of God, like in Kabbalah, the speaking about Sfirot, is what we can find inside ourselves. And the idea of image is very profound idea. In Middle Ages, Maimonides, they said image of God is the seichel, is the intellect. But we understand after Kant that intellect is not the only point or even the main point. Kabbalists understood in the Middle Ages that it's not intellect, it's the will. And we can speak after the Middle Ages, not only the intellect, not only the will, but about the human characteristics. And maybe this is the real meaning of Sfirot as midot. How do you say midot?
Character traits.
Character.
Right.
Can. So, chesed, mercy, rachamim, din, etc., the names of the Kabbalists, there are powers inside human beings.
Right.
And the idea is to give the higher characteristics like these the real place in life.
Right. So the God image then is really the image of the highest humanity. It's human potential at its fullest is what becomes the God image in some sense.
The potentials that God planted, and we know about its divine character because we know it in ourselves.
In ourselves.
This idea of for my flesh I shall see God is a very profound idea, Hasidic idea.
Right. Do you that shift towards the psychologization of the theosophy of the Kabbalist?
This is the reason that I don't like to use the word psychologization.
Yeah.
And I prefer interiorization.
Interiorization, right.
Because when you say that this is psychology, you mean it's very humanistic.
Right.
And I want to see that it's not the ordinary habits, aspects of human life. It's the unique.
It's the highest.
It's the highest.
Huh.
It's the highest, and therefore these are divine qualities. And when we speak about psychological, as Sholem said and others said, they lost something very important.
Right. It becomes
They reduced it. They
right.
reduced.
Right. It becomes a step down.
This is the reason that Sholem thought that Hasidism is a kind of reducing of Kabbalah.
Right.
And it's a mistake.
A neutralization, he called it.
For example,
Right.
it's or popularization.
Right.
It's more important.
Right.
And he understood, Buber said before him, Hasidism makes Kabbalah ethos.
Yes.
And he understood ethos as popularization.
Right.
But Buber didn't think about popularization. He think about realization, about taking seriously the ideas.
Right.
And taking them back to human life.
I'm just curious.
And you can find it in the Kabbalistic sources themselves.
Right.
The origin of this process is in Kabbalah and in Midrashic and some ideas of the sages. It's not something unique to Hasidism. The point of Hasidism is that they made this process the most important for them.
I actually wanted to ask you about that, because a lot of people speak about Hasidism as what's unique to it is this process of interiorization, as you're calling it. But I know that in your research you look at earlier forms of interiorization. It doesn't begin.
This was the idea, to look the origins.
Yeah.
To look for the origins.
I know we're already at the end of the conversation. Maybe this is an entirely new conversation, but could you tell us very briefly what the origins are and a very, very short sketch of how they make their way to Hasidism?
In Hasidism there was a great importance to the Psalms.
Mm-hmm.
And why? Because in many chapters of this important book, you can find expressions of inner religious life. So this is the reason that they came back to these chapters. So this is one example.
A very early example.
Example. Their sensitivity
is there a key verse there that you think about when you think about the interiorization in the Psalms?
No, I think that not all the Psalms are interior,
right?
But there is a great potential of interiorization in reading the Psalms. Once I had a conversation with the biblical researcher, the famous biblical researcher Moshe Greenberg, the late Moshe Greenberg, and he said it was a disaster. The Jews lost in the Middle Ages the Psalms because they saw the Christians using so much the Psalms, so they said, okay, we can give them this.
To them, right.
And Hasidism took it back and gave it importance. This is the first example that I can give you. But there are many examples in the sayings of the sages.
Yeah.
And even the idea that the reward of mitzvah, of commandment, is the commandment itself. Right. It's also kind of interiorization.
Right.
Very important.
Right.
And I bring in my book a lot of examples like this. Also in the Middle Ages, in the most important books of the Middle Ages, you can find among the philosophical or Kabbalistical theosophy also ideas of interiorization that when the Hasids, since the Baal Shem Tov, found them, they put them in the center of their life.
Right.
And this was the unique and the importance of Hasidism, which is also important to us today. Because they felt, very strangely, but they felt the need to interiorize their Judaism before modernity came to their life. Maybe Rabbi Nachman B'Paslav, as the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, was the first who understood that there is a problem with modernity. but it was not the first generation, not the second generation, even not the third generation of Hasidism. And then in our situation, there is important to going back to read again these Hasidic sources, because in these Hasidic sources we can find profound answers to the big conflicts with the mythical understanding of religion, the traditional mythical understanding of religion. Because myth is a kind of externalization of inner contents.
Right.
And when we have problem with any myth, is because there is conflict between reality and the story of the myth.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to overcome this conflict is to going back to the inner sources of the myth itself.
Right.
And maybe we can combine new myth that will not be in conflict with the reality.
Right. Isn't there a danger for religion in the process of interiorization? Rosenzweig talks about how when we interiorize God, we're very few steps away from atheism, from the non-existence of God.
Look, Franz Rosenzweig was the first modern intellectual Jew who decided to return back to traditional Judaism, as I see him. And I think that it's very important to understand this danger, as he called it. This is the situation, and the problem is how to overcome it. And I don't believe in artificial ways. Buber heard Rosenzweig. They worked together, they were very close in Frankfurt. At the beginning, he wrote it against Buber. And then he tried by his dialogical philosophy to overcome this problem and to say it's not inner, the revelation is between.
Right.
It's between.
This is Buber says that.
Yeah. Yes. And this is his answer to the danger that Rosenzweig declared about it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very serious answer. It's a very serious answer, speaking about the between, because this tendency of modern people to think, okay, everything is inside, so there is nothing outside. But the Hasidic idea that from my flesh I shall see God is that I learn about the outside from the inside, and it doesn't mean that there is nothing outside.
Right.
And this is the point, that we are not innocent. I don't know if we can say innocent.
Naive.
Or naive. It's better. We are not naive when we speak about the external aspects of the divine, to accept it as it is, and to use the formula, the traditional formula, is not the solution itself. The solution is to give new meaning to the traditional formula. And from this point of view, I think that Hasidism is a good storage of ideas to deal with these questions. Rosenzweig himself did it when he spoke about the difference between mitzvah and law, commandment and law. And he spoke about the mitzvah, which is doing with love and not as doing something externally. He went also toward the inner, toward the inwardness. He knew this secret, and he used this secret too.
Right.
So he didn't go against the idea of inner religious life, but against the tendency of modern people to see the inner as a substitute of the outer meaning of God.
Right.
And I think that he understood this point too.
Right. Do the mystics themselves, across the traditions, recognize this binary of inner and outer, or do you find them trying to deconstruct that binary?
I think that they were not like us because they didn't read Kant.
Some
They
of them
lived.
did.
I speak about the pre-Kantian.
Got it.
Pre-Kantian. I think that they felt that these are different fields, but they didn't see the conflict that we find between the inner and outer. And for example, the Gaonim, Rav Hai Gaon, when he read about the story about four was who entered to the Pardes,
This is 8th century we're talking.
yes, he said that they showed everything in the inner eye.
Right. Reading the passage in Tractate
Yes,
Chagiga.
yes. He was not a heretic.
Right. But he's
And
already
he
doing an
thought-
interiorizing reading.
Yes. This is the reason that I appreciate very much his saying about, because he said maybe the heroes themselves felt that they are going out.
Mm.
And the meaning for them was like an ecstasy in the Greeks, among the Greeks.
Right.
It's something which is going to heaven or
Right.
something like that. But he couldn't accept it as is. But he said, yes, in their inner feeling, they felt themselves in the sky, in heaven. So when I understood this, I read this, I said, okay, he understood very well the difference between inner and outer, and didn't see the inner experience as something which can cancel the religious meaning or the objective meaning of the divine.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you found it interesting when mystics are doing more work that's in the direction of correspondence, sort of the as above, so below, that the action of the ritual affects something above, whether that's the Neoplatonist doing theurgy or the Kabbalist doing yichudim.
Yes,
That
the
there's
theurgy.
right that there's sort of that there's a mirror, like the face.
There is direct connection between inner and outer.
Right. So that
Even the Baal Shem Tov was like this.
yeah. So
It's clear that he was like
So
this.
there's a direct connection there, but I'm wondering also, do they have a different do they have a different theory about inner and outer, about their permeability, about their is it the same reality from two perspectives in a Spinozistic sense, or is there any one way that or all the mystics doing something different in that question of the relationship between down here and up there, subjective and objective?
I think that they saw the relations in other way than most of us can think about it. And look, there are many differences between ancient sources and between us. For example, in the Bible, the blood is the soul. Blood is the soul.
Right.
We can't speak about blood as soul.
Right. We can't even speak about soul.
For us, soul is different. But for them, blood is soul.
Right.
Because blood is vitality.
Yeah, dam hu nefesh.
Yes.
Yeah.
The blood is vitality.
Yeah.
And that means for them that when blood is
Spilt.
Yes, the vitality
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
finish.
Yeah.
The same thing we can speak about inner and outer in the Middle Ages, and especially in the Roman period or in the classic period. They understood it not as we understand it. You can say the same thing in continuous to the blood is the soul, to the understanding of the connection between body and spirit.
Right.
For them, spirit can exist without any connection to body. For us, with all our biology and medical knowledge, it's more difficult to see it like this. We can feel something, but we see the connection between body and spirit is like something which is very tied together.
Right. Right. So we do live in radically different conceptual worlds than our ancient predecessors or
And
medieval.
we might take it in advantage in our mind.
Say that again. We might.
We might take these differences seriously when we are speaking about such sources of the Middle Ages or the biblical period. We are human beings, they were human beings, but their concepts were not our concepts.
Right. I'm just curious. I'm curious. You argue that towards the end of the book, you argue for an epistemological interiorization about our processes of thinking going inner and that being a shift from the way things were. Are you interested yourself in presenting a case for the permeability and the sort of the mutual effect of the inner and outer, that the way that we set our minds shapes the world around us, and the way that we set our environments shapes our inner experience? I hate to invoke, we won't invoke quantum physics about observation changing reality, because I think that's better left to the physicists. But
we must remember this,
that it's there as well, right?
That even them can speak like this.
But in a very simple fact, like if someone finds a way to change their state of being inside, if they, let's say like this, if someone smile, there are studies that show that if someone smiles, force themselves to smile, after some time they can start feeling happier, and when you feel happier, you see the world in a bit better eyes, and that makes you, there's a positive loop between the inner and outer, and that makes them, that they're not cut off from each other. Is that something that you're interested in pursuing as well?
Yes, I think that we must use such thoughts more in our life. For example, I think that there is connection between these examples, is the idea of הפוסל במומו פוסל. You know how to translate it, הפוסל במומו פוסל? When you negate someone, is about something that you have inside yourself.
Right. If you see, there's a famous Torah from Baal Shem Tov that Kol negaim adam roeh chutz minegei atzmo, which the simple reading is that a person sees all blemishes besides their own, but the Baal Shem Tov reads that Kol negaim she adam roeh chutz, whatever blemish you see on the outside in someone else is minegei atzmo, is your own deficiency.
Yes. I think that this is something very deep. More and more in my life, I can see myself speaking about critical things that I can't accept. And after 1, 2, 3 minutes, I say, okay, this is something inside me that I don't accept in myself. Because I don't accept it in myself, I can't accept it in others. But first of all, we don't see ourselves. We see only the failure of our neighbor.
The what? The
failure
or
the negative aspect or the. And I think that it's based on this understanding that the inner and outer are together.
Right.
And to check ourselves, will change or will improve our dealing with the world itself.
Right.
And you can see it's typical to a culture of interiorization, to speak like this. And we need such culture today. Because we live in very external culture. Everything is you can see everything in the internet, you can see everything in the screen of the TV, and then you accept it inside to yourself. But we need to see things from inside to outside, and not only from the outside to digest everything inside.
Right.
And then we can improve the situation, improve the world. Because if we can improve something inside us, we can change our atmosphere, our surrounding.
Right. It's a very empowering message to. I mean, the famous quote from Gandhi to be the change you want to see in the world. That if we really believe that our outer reality is shaped by our inner reality, the outer reality we don't have control over. We can't control what's happening in China and Ukraine and Russia, but we can control ourselves and
because we live in a mass culture. Mass culture.
Okay.
Communication is a communication of mass, and the mass is not a collection of individuals. It's less than collection of, to my sorrow, it's less than collection of individuals, because mass has its psychology.
The masses.
The masses, they have psychology of masses. And we can't permit ourselves giving only this psychology of masses to shape totally our life.
Right.
We have to do something in contra to this situation.
Right.
And interiorization of life, interiorization of religious sources, it's a kind of way to dealing with this situation.
What's a practical advice for someone that wants to live more interiorly or take control of interior life? What's a practical step someone could take?
Take seriously readings of interiorizations.
to read the book.
Because it's not my book. It's most of the books of this book is the collection of
it's an anthology of sorts.
It's kind of anthology it's not without order and meaning. But most of the content is not mine.
Yes.
I try to show with my finger what is important concerning interiorization. I think that the point is to put, we are like projectors, to put the light on the most important areas, fields, points. This is the contribution of academical work to the culture.
Right. Wonderful. I think it was wonderful, and I appreciate the call to interiority. I appreciate the call to reading. I think the activity of reading itself is an inner process that we go inside ourselves. I very much enjoyed spending interior time with you, with your words, and now being able to spend, perhaps you can call it some sort of loving communication modeled after here what we were reading, and I hope that it helps. You know, there is a fear where we are producing content here for the internet, and we're partaking in mass media and social media, and there's always a fear of, are we engaging in that in a holy way, in a way that's constructive for humanity? And it's my hope and prayer that this conversation, both in conducting it and in sharing it, is l'shem yichud, is for the sake of unity.
I believe too. I hope to.
Good. And we'd like to thank the Shalom Hartman Institute for hosting this series. And thank you, Professor Ron Margolin. Thank you, Ron, for being here with us and for sharing.
Thank you, too.
It was like an entire day conversation, because we break for lunch, we broke for seminar. It felt like we've been speaking all day. It's been very enjoyable.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Mitzvah.